Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this overwhelming crowd. I got a little worried about an hour and a half ago, but I'm delighted everyone showed up. First, I'd like to just mention that I am not trained as a scientist, and I'm also not trained as a historian, but those two fields have profoundly affected my work as an artist. So these connections that I've uncovered or I've discovered have been primarily through my gift of intuition, as well as just this wonderful opportunity to intersect with rare scientific books and manuscripts at a variety of different libraries. So let's get started. As I mentioned, I'm not really trained as an artist, but I have always had a passion for science, which, as you can see, started very early in the last century. And this was actually my first telescope and my first chemistry set. And I really believe that when I was a young girl, these things really planted the seed for my curiosity in the scientific world. Unfortunately, I'm severely dyslexic, which was not picked up at a young age. And I didn't realize this until I was in college. And actually, I've been doing some work up at Harvard, and they're studying dyslexia with astronomers. And what they're realizing is dyslexia is a real gift in terms of how you're wired, especially visually, how you're able to see things, which I'll be discussing a little bit later. But anyway, in talking about seeing things, this was actually the first telescope that I built with my dad back in the 60s. And I really believed it enabled me to see the cosmos, but it really enabled me to see where the people across the street. I grew up in Philadelphia, and there was a wonderful place in northern New Jersey called Edmunds Scientific Company that always had the best catalog, besides the Sears catalog. And Dad and I went over there, and we actually built this, and it was just wonderful. My big opportunity to really investigate the intersections of art and science came with a very unique invitation. And the invitation came 3 months before this exhibition, and that was to create 16 new sculptures to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Einstein's discovery of relativity. I must say that at the same time I was doing, that I was given this invitation, I was also finishing up 2 years worth of work for a big exhibition, and the curator sent me an email, and I emailed her back the next day, and I said, yes, I'll do it, and she said, are you out of your mind? And I said, well, I got to see if I can create 16 sculptures in a 3-month period, plus teaching full-time. And so what I did was I started looking at things that really resonated with me very deeply. And what I started realizing that one of the things that really connects art and science is visualization. And I have very specific things that I look at that really sort of inform my work or inspire my work. And being trained as a sculptor, I'm very interested how back in the 15th century, people before Google or smartphones were able to figure out systems or create systems of visualization. We see this very beautiful armillary and seeing how complex it is as a way of being able to inform, and then a piece that I created inspired by looking at these types of visual aids. Very interested in Doppler Effect, and actually just a very fun story to share with you. I was traveling in Salzburg, and this is the home of Mr. Doppler, Dr. Doppler. And only in Austria would someone who was a scientist have a piece of candy named after them. And it was really wonderful, and actually I need to show the little wrapper for this, which I have. It actually has this particular image of Doppler effect on it. And I love the fact that, you know, in another land someone has used science to name a candy. But anyway, this is my interpretation of the Doppler effect. These pieces had to fit in a very beautiful circular vitrine, series of circular vitrine cases, so they had to be a very special size. This particular piece was an homage to Carl Sagan, whose book, Cosmos, I happened to intuitively pull off my shelf that started my magical mystery store journey with figuring out what I wanted to do to create these pieces. So I needed to do a piece to honor Carl. And then someone who had actually seen this exhibition was a member of the American Philosophical Society. I don't know if anyone in here is familiar with this organization. It was actually started in Philadelphia in 1743 by Ben Franklin to, quote, promote useful information, whatever that meant in the 1700s. But anyway, I'm a Philly gal. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. And to have an opportunity to interact with this amazing collection of books was just awe-inspiring. And anyway, so the invitation I was granted was to come. I had access to anything in the collection and to use it as a muse to develop a body of work to be shown with the work, to be shown with the actual books and manuscripts. This was an epiphany, this experience for me, because what was so significant about this experience is I realized that before the advent of the camera, scientists had to be artists. It was the only way they could capture their observation. So I had access to seeing these extraordinary drawings, paintings, engravings of how people were recording scientific observation. And I was in total awe because, you know, being born in a time when we had cameras and ways of recording things, it was just astonishing to me that the scientists had this incredible ability to capture information in this way. So the exhibition that I did, I picked specific books or objects that resonated with me, and I created a piece of artwork that was a response to that. Of course, because being from Philadelphia, Ben Franklin was weighing heavily on my mind. I didn't know this about Ben Franklin, but he was a mathematician. He loved mathematic puzzles. And this particular one was one that really captured my imagination, called the Magic Circle of Circles. And what you're seeing on the right was my art response to this very complex mathematical puzzle. One of the other really significant collections that they have at the American Philosophical Society are all the diaries of John Archibald Wheeler, who's the father of the black hole and dark matter. And I really wasn't that interested in seeing them. And then one day I came to my desk and there was this huge cart full of all these diaries. And I thought, wow, they really want me to look at these things. So I sat down and I opened up one of the diaries, and there were John Wheeler's physics notes. Now, John Wheeler was actually a contemporary of Einstein and taught at Princeton. And as I mentioned, he's significant because he coined the phrase dark matter and black hole. And so I'm seeing a page like this with physics notes, obviously a lecture note, and as a college professor I could obviously resonate with that. And then I turned the next page, and there were 3 pages of him describing a Chinese dinner that he had, who was at the dinner, what he ate, and then at the end was take the fortune from a fortune cookie. I immediately fell in love with this man, who I unfortunately never got to meet, but it was the human side, but it was also the scientific side in terms of how he was describing this Chinese meal. One of probably the most popular books in the library is a wonderful hand-drawn book called The Bee Book. And it was created by John Benbow, who actually was a beekeeper. And it's hand-drawn, handwritten, and just the most beautiful drawings, and it's palm size. So it's about the size of a smartphone, but it has a little bit more personality to it. And here is my response to that piece. Just to give you an idea, these are mylar. They're painted with acrylic and graphite on mylar. This is one of the vitrine cases. So what you're seeing are the books that inspired the work, and then the actual piece installed with it. So there was this wonderful dialogue going on with the actual books and then the artwork that was inspired by it. As a result of that research that I was doing, I was starting a project dealing with the periodic table of elements. I was invited to present a lecture in Santiago, Chile, and walked into my home and had this vision of the periodic table of elements. And at first I thought it was jet lag or bad food on the airplane, because why would you walk into your home as an artist and have this like vision of the periodic table of elements? So after I sat with it a little bit, what I realized is it was sent to me that I was supposed to do something with it. And I spent about a year and a half. It took me up high in the Himalayas to Bhutan to look at mandalas. And it also took me to the Chemical Heritage Foundation, which is also in Philadelphia. And if you're interested in chemistry and you find yourself in Philadelphia, you should go, because it is one of the treasures, I think, of chemistry in this country. But they have a wonderful first edition of Mendelev's periodic chart. And what's so interesting about this is Mendeleev was so intuitive, and I really think that's another thing that really connects artists and scientists, is we have this really key sense of intuition. He knew there would be elements placed here, but he wasn't sure what they were, but he left room in the chart so those could be revealed at a certain point later. And I just love that aspect of seeing this when I saw this particular book. So as I was developing my quest on how to even approach envisioning the periodic table in a new way, I had to go back to the beginning of how we envision elements. And so that takes us all the way back to Plato. And Plato, as many of you know, because you hopefully have heard of the Platonic solids, envisioned his elements as polyhedra. And what he did was to assign a specific polyhedra to a specific element. And what I did for, and some of you might be aware that last year was the International Year of Chemistry, what I wanted to do is I thought, if I'm going to build a periodic table of elements, I need to build the polyhedras. And it was really sort of fun being a sculptor. I literally built them really large, like between 3 and 6 feet. That way I could really feel like what it was like. But I had to put a little spin on it. I wanted them to be open, because this whole notion of reveal, because to me the periodic table was being revealed to me little bits at a time. So what I did is, what you're seeing here are the polyhedra, the Platonic solids. They're made out of mylar with fiberglass rods, and they're held on the wall with tension and compression. And so you just pull one of these out and they just cease to be. And they were just really wonderful. They were like floating up this wall. So here we are. We're back at that rigid, gridded, uninspiring. I think we look at this and we probably all break out in a cold sweat remembering our high school chemistry class. Sorry, Tammy. But wait, there's more. So as I'm looking at this chart and trying to see how I can make that rigid chart have this sense of beauty and be compelling to people, especially students, get them excited, what I realized I was being attracted to were the orbitals. And the orbitals are the most ethereal part of the element. And I found them to be just very magical, because we don't really know what they look like. And I thought, perfect. It's a perfect form to really work with. So what I did is I went on another quest of how other scientists, other people have interpreted the periodic table of elements. And I came across Boyer's atomic flowers. And then I got this idea, I'm going to build a garden. Because if you think about what a garden's about, it's always about contemplation, meditation. It's a place of learning. And so what I did was I got this vision of creating a garden based on a Fibonacci sequence, but not just on one. What I was envisioning was taking each of the columns of the periodic table and the elements on those columns, putting them on their own Fibonacci sequence and rotating them. So I called an architect friend of mine and said, that can't be done. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm seeing it in my head. It can be done. He said, all right, give me a week. Give me a week. I applaud your enthusiasm. Let me see what I can do. So he calls me in 2 days. He says, not only can it be done, what you see is magnificent, and I can help you manifest this, because I needed his help with scale and elevation for my garden. So this is what he did. What he was able to do was to take what I was envisioning, and he was able to plot it out. And this was a very unusual exhibition space in Northern Virginia. It's at the Greater Reston Arts Center. And it's octagonal, which is very unusual for a gallery space, and it's fronted by a lot of windows. So I decided again to work with the Mylar, because Mylar is a very beautiful material, because the light coming through the windows made it change, and it looked very different at different times of the day. And you know, chemistry is all about transformation. I mean, it's such a magical science, and it has such a bad rap. And Tammy and I are trying to change this, one person at a time, because it engages all the senses: sight, sound, transformation. It's magical. So anyway, what we did is we had this column that we couldn't move. So what we decided to do was start with the smaller elements, hydrogen, helium, have them rotate around and then spiral out, so you could walk through this. So I show you this only so you can see that I built the universe in my studio. And how many artists get to build the universe in their studio? So. And this is the actual installation itself. And you got to walk through it. We had the Platonic solids in a smaller gallery off to the side. What was so interesting about this, over 4,000 people came to visit this in a 4 to 5 week period. It broke all type of exhibition records for this particular space. People would come, they would meditate in it, they would lay on their bellies, they'd lay on their backs. I mean, it was fascinating, totally fascinating. And it was great because as you would lay down, you would get different vantage points, seeing the different layers of the orbital patterns. Now, sorry, it's working. Okay, what you're listening to now was an inspiration for another aspect to my garden of orbital flowers. During my several times of research at the Chemical Heritage Foundation, I came across this wonderful artist named Michael Mayer, and he's an Alchemist 1617. And he's considered the first multimedia artist, because what he did was he did these beautiful engravings of alchemistic visions. And not only did he do an engraving, but for every engraving he created a beautiful musical fugue. And so I thought, oh, I have to have sound. So, now what you're seeing here, these are not constellations. What you're seeing here is actually a computer screen. And it took me about a year to find a sound artist, because I knew that person was out there. And Google, thank God for Google, I found this person. And this is a sound artist in Portland, Oregon, who was basically examining what I was examining, but with sound. And what she does is she works with the vibrations coming from atoms in all the elements, and she's able to capture them through a Lamore frequency, which is very similar, well, it is what they use for MRIs. And then she translates that into audible sound and uses it to create these beautiful sound pieces. And I just always have to share this. Susan and I share the same birthday. Now, how cosmic is that? I mean, yeah. That's 365 chances that would happen. But anyway, what you're hearing now is the soundscape that accompanied the experience of walking through the periodic table. So you not only experience the periodic table through walking through it, traversing through it, but through hearing it. I also decided to add to this celebration of sight and sound movement, dance. And I found a wonderful contemporary dance troupe in the Washington, D.C. area who was very enthusiastic about joining us. And so we did a performance piece using the sight and the sound as a set for a dance concert. And so the whole idea was to really take that Mendeleev rigid gridded chart and really turn it into a huge celebration to prepare people for the International Year of Chemistry, which was last year. And it worked. From there, And I'm just going to run through this pretty quickly. I've done a lot of other collaborations with artists and, with scientists. And I'm very interested in mapping, how things are mapped, and visualization, because visualization really is the thing that connects both art and science. And so these pieces based on electron density maps, which are very, after the orbitals, now we're moving to electron density maps, inspired this series of pieces. This is paint on Mylar. I've worked with Mylar for about 25 years. And it's so interesting to me because I'm very interested in scientific visualization, making the invisible visible, which is the name of the talk. And then, just taking some of these flat maps that I've seen and really making them dimensional. And I was invited to present a lecture to neuroscience scientists at the National Institute of Health last fall. And someone who had seen my lecture, a retina principal, grabbed my arm and he said, "I must take you to my office." I thought, uh-oh, I have to see my etchings. I thought, okay, sure, I'm up for that. So anyway, this is what he showed me. Well, it wasn't actually an etching. But anyway, Vernonia Hall won the Nobel Prize in the 1900s for his work dealing with rods and cones. And the scientist was so taken by my presentation, the work that I showed him, he wanted to share this with me. What was significant about this experience was I was working with this piece, which is another Alchemist from 1667, Kircher. And I was doing a piece for an exhibition in April in Washington, and I couldn't figure out how to solve part of the problem. When I saw Vernonia Hall's work, it enabled me to complete this piece. And so what you're seeing here was this interpretation of the retina. And what was very interesting, when I sent this to the guy back at National Institute of Health, he thought this was the ganglia. He had no idea, and I love that. I mean, that's what I love about the universality of abstract art. I mean, I see it as water, Kircher sees it as water, the neuroscientist, he sees it as the ganglia. Everyone's right. As a result of this presentation and working with them, I've been invited to do a fellowship next summer at National Institute of Health in the neuroscience department. I'm very excited about this. And basically what I'm going to be doing is interacting, dialoguing with the scientists to create and envision different aspects of neuroscience. So I'm very excited about that because I don't know much about it, but I think hopefully by the end of the summer, I hope there won't be a test on it, but hopefully my work will capture some of my observations. And then I'm going to be ending my presentation tonight with something also that's just developed this past fall. I was invited to come up to Harvard, the Center for Astrophysics, to do a presentation. And this particular image sort of is a metaphor for what I'm doing up at Harvard right now. What you're seeing here are two galaxies that are coming together to eventually, in millions of years, form one galaxy. And I use it as a metaphor for this project that's starting to develop right now. As I mentioned, last December I was invited to come up to Harvard to present a lecture at the Center for Astrophysics. And I have to tell you, it was so humbling to stand at the same lectern that Einstein did to do this presentation and know I was sucking in his atoms. Well, that's what they told me. I did feel that. I think that's the chills that you were talking about. But anyway, I'm going to be working with several different departments for the Center for Astrophysics, the curator of astronomical photographs, the history of science department. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of the history of science, and also the collection of historic instruments. And basically, what I'm very interested in is these women, the women calculators. And some of you, I see some people are shaking their heads. Again, before the smartphones, these women were basically, a lot of them were maids, and what they did was to calculate the distance of the stars. And this is Professor Pickering. They used to call him Pickering's harem, this group of women. And they would spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And I've seen these glass plates. They're absolutely gorgeous, these photographic glass plates, noting just these numbers and then these tiny little, well, you'll see here, sequences of luminosity based on stellar spectra, which is really, really interesting to me. And all these little black marks in between, elements. But we're moving, where I'm moving with this is the big project that Susan Alexander, my collaborating sound partner, and I are investigating, which are chemical origins of the universe. So we're really interested in this whole notion of how these chemicals started out here and then sort of land in our bodies. And you might be curious about this little meteorite here. I collect meteorites, I really love them. I just found out about 4 weeks ago that NASA has meteorites that have fallen in Antarctica. And what's so significant about this is usually when a meteorite falls here, it's not as pure because it just impacts with the atmosphere and everything else. So when it falls in Antarctica, it's preserved because it's in the ice. And what they have found now is traces of DNA particles, but really significant ones, not little ones. And actually, in 4 weeks, I've been invited to go to NASA. I'm meeting with a young man who has actually uncovered this to actually see these meteorites and talk to him more about it in relationship to the project. And this is how I end my lecture. And let me just say, this is alchemistic, and it's a universal diagram for the formation of questions about every possible question. So you see, all things can be visualized, even questions. So thank you very much, and does anyone have any questions?